company is now in our 20 years, and I was speaking with Alenka about the challenges for the next 10 years ahead, and I thought it would be an opportunity for me to share with some of our industry colleagues that are joining on this webinar, maybe some also some customers that are interested in what is the next thing. So I thought I would take you through what, at least from our perspective, is the journey that we're almost all in for in the telematics industry over the next 10 years. I won't bore you with the next two slides, just to say that like Teltonica, our company has been involved in the development of telematics with a very hardware-centric lens for the first 20 years of our company's life. All the way through 2019, we've been innovating devices that connect to the vehicle to enable data to be seen. But you can see even in the year 2020, we've highlighted something different. It's not a hardware device. Now it's charts and graphs and subscriptions and data science and electric vehicles. So I thought I would take you through 5 realities that I think will shape the adoption of data between now and 2030, which I will do now. So the first reality that I want to share with you is that big data matters. While it's a overused expression in some cases, for 5 years, people have talked about big data. The reality is that it's now in production. So we have the ability with advanced machine learning algorithms, machine vision in the case of dash cameras. If you happen to be in the video business or working with dash cameras, you know that it's not just about recording the event anymore. Now it's about machine learning and machine vision, looking at the eyes of the driver and notifying the driver with the processing happening on the edge, in the device, or in the cloud. It's really an incredible time to be involved in things like artificial intelligence and machine learning and big data. We were fortunate over the last 6 months since April, under COVID, to really show what data science can do for the health of an industry. We combined actually with a European company called Webfleet, and together we had over 3 million vehicles in the overall global market that we were able to combine our data sets and show trips and the recovery, actually the decline in the recovery. So what you can see in these small little charts, I don't need to get into the granular detail. This is actually from a Deloitte website. Our partner Deloitte ingested that data and is publishing a daily update on where the industries are recovering. I'm showing you in the upper left, the United Kingdom, Australia in the lower left-hand corner. In the upper is Canada, and then the United States in the lower right-hand corner. You can see obviously the decline in trip activity. These are the number of trips taken by vehicles. And then you can see the gradual increase, but not every country, not every region has responded the same. You can see actually how thin Australia's recovery was. They actually didn't get nearly the economic impact on terms of telematics trips as the other regions in the world did. And every region, even in Canada and the United States, you can see even at a state or a regional level, they are recovering differently. And that's all due to aggregate anonymous data. So the ability for us to deliver a data experience for the customer in their database so the customer can manage their day-to-day work is absolutely what we're all here for in the telematics industry. We're here to serve our customers. In addition to that, taking those data sets and putting them into an anonymous aggregate data area, which is a data lake or an ocean. If you've got 40 billion pieces of data a day to record, it's a really good way for us to provide at no cost access to an incredible pool of trips and diagnostic data and the way that vehicles drive, and share that with the global community. Our data sets are free, and anybody on this call, including people that are telematics service providers, could come to us and ask us to have access to that data, and we don't charge for it. It's not ours to charge for. We don't sell our customers' data. Our customers have granted us access to use their data for this anonymous aggregate purpose, and it's a phenomenal service that we can provide. So data is a very, very important trend that every single business on the planet will either already be deep into developing their data science strategy, or they will have already hired some data scientists that are trying to figure it out. The second trend, I think, or the reality that I think is going to shape our future is data control. So we all understand, especially in Europe, GDPR. In the United States, they have something called CCPA, which is very, very similar to the California Privacy Act. However, the definition of the idea that the customer controls who they give access to their data is the key premise of GDPR. So it's the controller is the customer, and then we in the telematics industry, ourselves included, and most people on this call and others, are simply processors of that data. Our job is to respond to the command of the customer. The customer makes all the decisions, and we simply are acting as a processor on their behalf. But this is still playing out. It's not done yet. Just a few months ago in Europe, the Privacy Shield, which a lot of global telematics providers were relying on as the secure way, or at least the security way of telling a customer, it's okay, I can host your data for you in my cloud environment, changed. So Privacy Shield was found to be invalid. And now data has to be hosted in region. Now, we fortunately are already there. We were okay. So it did not impact us. It did impact other people in the telematics industry, but we can see this playing out in many countries around the world. So as we look for global fleet customers who are operating in multiple countries, multiple regions, we have to explain to them why they can't just put a database up for every country in the world and log in and see their data. It's not possible. So it's playing out on many, many levels, and every region will play it differently, and it will be a differentiator for regions in the world based on how data is managed. And again, as I said, this is definitely a work in progress. It's not quite there yet. And again, it's not the judgment of which is better. European businesses, I would say, are far behind the United States in the use of telematics. American businesses are generally speaking using it for a purpose to begin with, but they also want all the data to experiment and think of new ideas and transform the business. Whereas in Europe, as you know, the employee is really in control of a lot of the decision-making, depending on which European country, of course, we're speaking about, but it's an awful lot more control that the employee has in the say of, why are you recording data at all? And how are you using that data? So the business purpose must be clearly defined, and you cannot get scope creep. It has to be done for an express purpose. So I think that there is a strategic advantage that businesses around the world have, where they are able to use data for a business purpose, not abusing it, but using it, clearly and transparently explaining why they're using the data. But I think at the end of the day, we'll see if this advantage for the other places in the world that are not constrained with such country-specific laws around controlling data and the employees' control of their data. It'll be very interesting. I made the comment for businesses to compete globally, data access is absolutely essential. So I think that we will see this going on for the next 10 years. Businesses will constantly be pushing the boundaries of government to say, we need access to data. It's part of our strategic advantage as a country. We need access to this data. We have to transform how we consume data. Third reality is connected car. We just spoke with Teltonica, and I think Andreas has, or Antanas has got a very good point on connected car. It is coming down the pike. It's 5G. It's not just 2G, it's going away. 3G is there, LTE. There's more sensors coming on board. I think that connected car and staying in touch with what the OEM strategy is the most important thing. A lot of us in the telematics industry are aftermarket providers. We provide a device that is installed in the vehicle after it is built. We have to understand that the OEMs are also trying to differentiate themselves. Cars look very, very similar. When you get into electric vehicles and hybrid electric vehicles and all of the testing that happens, cars about 6 or 7 years from now look extremely similar, and they need to be differentiated somehow. So the OEMs are trying to differentiate themselves on data and the multimedia experience that the consumer will have. My concern in the telematics industry is that we'll leave our needs in fleet out in the cold. It's all about the competition of the OEM to try to drive consumer strategy and get consumer adoption of vehicles. But fleet, who also needs that data from those vehicles, is the secondary consideration, and sometimes zero consideration whatsoever. And they're simply going to be asking us to connect to their data in the cloud and not be able to get the actual live sensor data from the vehicle itself, which is going to limit our ability to innovate. So it is a concern. We are working with the OEMs positively and proactively. It's highly possible that the OEMs will fail in their strategy. They are not technology specialists. Let's face it, at the end of the day, they are in fact manufacturers of vehicles. Fourth trend is carbon neutral. Now, I didn't say EV, I said carbon neutral. So to me, the idea of fleet efficiency, the suitability of the vehicle for the purpose, and EV infrastructure are really important concepts. Carbon neutral for me is that vehicles are necessary to move goods and services. They're not going away. Carbon neutral means you don't drive vehicles. You must drive vehicles. But I think that what we've seen over the last year, especially since the spring, is there's been an acceleration of car sharing and reduction of what they call perk vehicles, especially in Europe. Not so much perk vehicles in the United States, but the multiple modes of mobility and the ability for the employee to say, I'm working from home. I don't need a perk vehicle. It's expensive. The idea of I don't have to park my service vehicle at my offices or my warehouse locations. I now drive my service vehicle to my driveway and I park it at home for safety and for health. This is a trend that's going to accelerate throughout next year, and it will change the buying behavior of vehicles. And specification of electric vehicles now changes because we have to think about how do we charge our company vehicles that are now parked in the driveway of our employees. So EV is a strategy, but the drive to 2030 will be about carbon neutrality. The CEO of a company isn't going to say, we must be EV, electric vehicles. He's going to say, we have to be carbon neutral by 2030. Amazon just recently announced that they're going to be carbon neutral as an organization. I think by 2040, they will be fully carbon neutral. And that takes a lot of time and a lot of thought, but you have to lay out the objective. As a company, we'll be carbon neutral, and you start studying facilities as the number one consumer of carbon or CO2. Number two is right in our space, people, it's telematics. So we owe it to our own customers to be part of the CO2 problem. And how do we reduce the amount of carbon that vehicles are producing? Ideally, we're helping companies transition to electric. And then the fifth reality that will shape our adoption of data is that telematics will be free in about 10 years' time or sooner. And that's quite the statement. Now, what do I mean by telematics is free? It really is that people are right now still buying telematics services as a service, as a software, as a service business. People that are selling telematics subscriptions are showing them reports and how to interact with data. They may have APIs that enable that customers' back office software systems, their accounting systems and so on, to share the data coming from their vehicles, which is an extension of the user experience or the UI that the telematics provider is putting forward. The reality is that by 2030, customers won't be subscribing to the telematics provider. They'll be subscribing to modules inside their back office system that leverages the data coming from vehicles. So the idea of extending the value of telematics through APIs into the back office of customers to allow other software systems in their ERP accounts, their accounting systems, of course, their CRM systems, maybe their payroll systems, their sensors, their safety systems, their compliance systems. All of those things are also investments that people are making. And because infrastructure is so great and hosting data in the cloud is so inexpensive, and with the speed of the internet, it's so much faster. Now all of those things are happening up in the cloud. It really makes for cloud-to-cloud exchange of data to be highly scalable, to be automated, to be secure, and to be very, very reliable. So in closing, my last thought here, before we maybe have about 4 or 5 minutes to chat with Alenka, is that I truly believe that countries and businesses, people will experience work and life very differently based on data access regional laws that we're presently actively evolving. The 5 topics that I mentioned for the last 15 minutes, I think are really exciting, but not all of us are going to be able to share in that excitement equally. And the constraint will be the ability of governments to allow us to do that. So really engage in the concept of data access and engage at the local level and at the regional level, wherever you may be. Figure out what you need in terms of your data. Understand deeply GDPR. Don't just react to it, but understand it. What is the purpose of it? What was the purpose of the Schrems law that was just passed 3 or 4 months ago during COVID that struck down Privacy Shield? What are we getting at? And then what are the other places in the world doing? And if you really believe that especially Central or Eastern Europe needs to be competitive, you need to define your role as a competitive region in relation to what's happening in Western Europe and the rest of the world. I think it's a great opportunity for us all to understand the technology at a data science level and to participate together as an industry, not as competitors, but as an industry in the telematics space, to collectively go and understand what we can do better to make sure that data is accessible for businesses and for people to experience life, I think, in a better way.